Hello, everybody. Sorry, I thought I had set the stream for 9:30 or 9:45, not 9:30, and yeah, so I was on time in my head. But yeah, not actually for the stream. So we have kind of an interesting topic to talk about tonight because a lot of people have been saying that, well, Walt Disney, he went bankrupt before, and the Disney Company was in trouble before in the 80s, and they managed to pull through. And part of what we're going to talk about tonight is what vast difference it was between the Disney of the 80s and the Disney of today. So first, let's see what he had to say himself about certain topics.
I believed at that time that Mr. Sorrell was a communist because of all the things that I had heard and had seen his name appearing on many of the Commie Front things. And when he pulled the strike, the first people to smear me and put me on the unfair list were all of the Commie Front organizations. I can't remember them all. They've changed so often. But one that's clear in my mind is the League of Women Voters, the People's World, the Daily Worker, and the PM magazine in New York. They smeared me. Nobody came near to find out what the true facts of the thing were. And I even went into the same smear in South America through some commie periodicals in South America, and generally throughout the world, all the commie groups.
All right. So that was, for those that don't know, in 1947, Walt Disney testified in front of the HUAC and was telling them that commies were taking over Hollywood. They were taking over everything. They were in everything. And that he was being smeared, and that the things that were being said were untrue, but nobody was bothering to find out the truth because that would have been too inconvenient. That's not the story that they needed. They needed him to be the big bad. And as much as Professor Tolkien disliked the Walt Disney Company for good reason and disliked Walt Disney himself, there is no denying what the man did for pop culture, for Americana, and for, it's the Disney brand is a juggernaut today because of what that man did, because of what he was capable of. So it's really crazy to think how much things have changed in half a century. It's only been the Walt Disney Company since 1986. So when you think about where he came from and what he did, and the fact that he'd already had one company fail, the Walt Disney Company should be like one of the greatest underdog American dream stories made reality ever. But they only trot that out when it's convenient. They don't actually seem to care about their legacy or what Walt Disney did. All of these IPs and all of these people who have jobs, like all of these things wouldn't have been possible without the work ethic and dedication of this man and his vision and his dream. And they're happy to just piss it all away. So it's crazy when you think about it in that context. Let's see. Hello, Charlie Stevenson. What's going on? Soul Assassin. Good evening. Rocky the Black Dragon. Hello. Sultan. What's going on? Wonderful to see you. Ahoy, Father Miller. Thank you for dropping by to say hi. I appreciate it. So I found a couple of cool things. Not anything too crazy for too many things. But I was kind of rooting around and I was like, oh man, like everybody talks about that the fact that Disney can save itself like it did back in the 90s. And I don't think people realize how much changed. So, because I'm a history nerd, we're gonna do a little bit of delving. We're gonna have some fun. So, from the Britannica. Now, take this with a grain of salt because it is the Britannica. But for the most part, everything that I have been able to, I guess, ascertain, this is fairly accurate. Like they didn't go back and tweak a bunch of stuff to try and make it look better for them, as far as I can tell. But Walt Disney began his career in Kansas, and he and his friend, Ub Iwerks, who was a gifted animator, they founded the Laugh-O-Gram Film Studio. They actually created Alice in Cartoonland, but by the time it was finished, it was too late. They were not able to get it out in time, and in 1927, he filed for bankruptcy. The Laugh-O-Gram Films, the studio that he and his friends started in Kansas, it folded. It went under. And they filed for bankruptcy. So yeah, within weeks of its completion, Disney filed for bankruptcy and left Kansas City. And he went to Hollywood. Alice in Cartoonland turned out to be a surprise hit, and orders from distributors for more Alice films compelled Disney to reopen shop in Hollywood with the help of his brother, Roy Disney, a lifelong business partner. Okay? They always say that you should keep family and business separate. But if that was the case, then why did we have family businesses for centuries and they thrived and they grew? Honestly, the division of the family has been bad for business, quite frankly. And then they called up the Kansas City team to come join them out in California. And they did Alice films for a while after that. Now we're getting into what really launched them and what just went to public domain. Steamboat Willie. It was a huge success, right? So they renamed their company to Walt Disney Productions in 1929, and they produced cartoons that had Mickey Mouse and then Donald Duck and Pluto and Goofy, and we start to get these cast of characters that a bunch of us have grown up with, that a bunch of us know. And the crazy part is, like, I have to go back and remind myself, Pluto started out as Goofy's dog. How now when you see the cartoons, you would never think that. So that is kind of the start of it. And then you get the Three Little Pigs in 1933. Their really big hit in 1937 was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So Walt Disney was founded on the mouse, but what gave it a fighting chance and what gave it footing is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Steamboat Willie was a huge success. And I did not know this, but because I had always thought that Snow White was the first full-length feature animated film that Disney did. That is not the case. It's actually The Adventures of Prince Ahmed from 1926, so over a decade beforehand. So Steamboat Willie was a huge hit, and now they have Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was an incredible sensation. It was more than they anticipated. And so they got really excited. So then they made Pinocchio, which was a flop. It cost $2.3 million to make, and it only made $2 million. And Fantasia was not the hit they thought it was going to be either. And neither was Dumbo. Bambi, however, was able to pull off a bit of success. But Pinocchio actually ended up costing the company quite a bit of money, especially because he was trying to expand at the time. And it's so fun. I tried to find out exactly how much he paid for the 42 acres that would eventually become Walt Disney World, because that was always his vision. Like, Epcot was one of his visions. It's actually the last thing that got built in Walt Disney World that was one of Walt's visions while he was alive. It was supposed to be the community of tomorrow, or the town of tomorrow, the city of tomorrow, and it became Epcot Center. And so the last element was a key ingredient in Disney's features. Disney himself felt that young people could tolerate evil antagonists and scenes of unpleasantness, provided that the forces of good triumphed in the end. You do not see... Did you all hear that? The man who started it all said young people can tolerate evil antagonists and scenes of unpleasant... I mean, you got, like, there are scenes in Fantasia that are terrifying. Dumbo, like, when he's crying, like, his mom gets locked up and they're crying and they're reaching their trunks through, and then the crows make fun of him and belittle him, and you have the other elephants who are treating him terribly, and he gets treated so awful, but then in the end he literally soars above them. He wins. Like, Dumbo wins. Then you have Bambi. Who can forget that? Mom dies, gets shot by a hunter. Pinocchio, that donkey scene terrified me as a kid. Like, I was just like, oh my goodness. And then, like, his villains had so much character and so much animation, and they really felt real. Like, they were chomping on cigars, and they were sweaty, and they were like, they were shrewd, and they were greedy, and they were manipulative, and like, we as the audience could see that, but like, Pinocchio didn't see that. And so now we don't have that. Now we have the misunderstood villain. Exactly, Salted. Like, now villains are just misunderstood. Everybody is an anti-hero, or everybody is a misunderstood villain, and they would be a hero if it just depends on your point of view. And it's just insane, because when you read what were his foundations for the elements of his story, it's quite frank, like, young people can tolerate evil antagonists and scenes of unpleasantness. But in order to balance that, here's the other thing. There has to be balance. The forces of good have to triumph in the end. Because if the forces of good don't triumph, then what was the point? Now you're just watching a nihilistic, droll, awful film about an innocent boy, who just gets beaten down. But like in Pinocchio, there were consequences to his actions. Pinocchio is not the hero of that story. Geppetto is. Geppetto is the hero of that story. Yes, Pinocchio goes and gets Geppetto out of the way. I'm like, oh, wasn't that so heroic? But Pinocchio does not actually... He doesn't become a real boy until the end of the film. And up until then, he's disobedient. He's wayward. He doesn't go to school. Like, just, like, look at how much emphasis it was. They weren't bashing you over the head. Oh, you need to go get a degree. You need to go get a degree. But it was, boys like you need to go to school so you can learn how to read. And because he didn't listen to his father, all of these things kept happening, right? He was put in a circus. He was kidnapped and trafficked. Pinocchio was, like, people overlook that. Like, these young boys were literally trafficked in that film. Like, it's just so insane. And that's the difference. Pinocchio is a lesson in, one, yes, you have free will. You can do whatever it is you want, but you are not going to be able to escape the consequences of those actions forever. And often it's the people you love who are going to suffer more, because Geppetto went out to try and find his son and got swallowed by a freaking whale. Like, it's insane. There was so much. So up in here, when he brought together Pinocchio, there needed to be music, comedy, which there was, pathos, adventure, and genuine horror. Oh my gosh. I still remember watching Snow. I was 6 years old. It was one of those old, like, orange flower recliners. 90s, 80s, and 90s babies and kids will know what I'm talking about. It was one of those old orange flower recliners. My grandma was sitting in it, and it was on one of those big boob tubes, like the big boob tube TVs. They're huge. Like, the screen is like a third of the size of the actual box that it sits in. And like, I was fine with Snow White the whole way. Like, the end, when she falls off the cliff at the end, it doesn't bother me. The lightning didn't bother me. The dwarfs chasing her, like, none of these things bothered me. The one thing that did, you guys know the scene where she's reading from the book and she goes, she's reading and she goes, the sleeping, I still remember the line. I haven't watched Snow White in years. The sleeping death. And then she looks up. It's literally a fourth wall break in an animated film. And then the whole screen goes black except for her eyes. And then it goes black. Oh my God, that freaked me out beyond all hellbound imagination. Like, I don't know why. It just, because she's dipping an apple in literal poison and it makes the shape of a skull. Didn't bother me. She's literally standing over Snow White's corpse, quote unquote corpse. Doesn't bother me. Dwarves chase her up a cliff. Lightning is striking. Wind is everywhere. Trees are grabbing. Even when Snow White is terrified running through the woods and she sees all the eyeballs in the woods and they turn out to just be like woodland creatures and stuff, none of that bugged me. But oh my gosh, the scene where it's just her eyeballs, that fourth wall break, oh, that fucked with me as a kid. I was, that did something down in my soul. I already said the donkey scene scared the bejesus out of me as well. Dumbo had some horror scenes in there. Like, these are things that are missing from Walt Disney. I honestly think the reason the first Pirates of the Caribbean was so successful is because it had a lot of this in there. It had music, it had comedy, it had adventure, it had pathos, and it had genuine horror. And then you had actual evil antagonists. I'm not talking about later when Balboa comes back. Like, I'm not talking about the later films. That first film, if you go back and watch it, it hits every single thing on Walt Disney's Walt Disney's what is it? Oh, words escape me. Blueprint for a movie, for a successful film. Okay? So it's crazy to me that we have that the Walt Disney Company has fallen so far. So there was a strike in the 40s, right? And because of everything that happened, the Fed got involved. So many things were going on. There were top studio animators got fired because the animators wanted to unionize, and the unions today, again, much like Disney, unions are pointless today. They do not serve the purpose with which they were created. They were good for about half a second, and then they got exploited by the political elites. And I wish more people realized that. I really do. I wish that this current, the strike that just happened should be an eye-opener to a lot of people, because you have 6 individuals screwing it up for thousands of people. That is not at all a good system to operate within. None at all. So now, Disney is in trouble in the 40s. Okay? So World War II has happened. A lot of stuff's going on. Disney was very patriotic himself. They had a lot of morale films. He really tried to help any way he could with what was going on, and they started to focus more on short films and documentaries and stuff like that because like of all the things that was going on in the world, their priorities didn't shift, but between the strike, the war, and the threat of unionization, I mean, it changed the very fabric of Disney in the 40s. Well, the Three Caballeros, which if you guys have never seen, you should, and Song of the South came out. Both have a live action animated combination, much like Space Jam. A lot of people, for some reason, think Space Jam or Who Framed Roger Rabbit were the first ones to do that, and that's not the case. In fact, his first shorts, his Alice in Dreamland, where did it go? Sorry, Alice in Cartoonland. I knew that was wrong. Alice in Cartoonland was actually a girl, and she was involved in like an animated process. So she was actually like witnessing the animation stuff. So they had already started to combine it, but now they had instead of it being shorts, now they had full length live action and animation combinations. So the Three Caballeros and Song of the South both came out in the 1940s. And that was all well and good, but Disney's still in trouble. Disney's struggling. They have no capital. They have no liquid. He tried to expand too fast. Now he has all these other people working under him. And as we saw in that clip, there's communists that are trying to undermine his entire operation, his entire storytelling. And they smeared him and they belittled him and they were trying to do anything they could to destroy the man because he was a threat, because what he was building was a threat. Hello, D-Day Direwolf. Thank you for the membership, chat. You've been a member for 14 months. I genuinely appreciate you. Mwah. Thank you. And hello, Miss Smart Muses. It's wonderful to see you. Proven 22. Kids need a little scare. It's fun and healthy. I saw Empire Strikes Back at 5 and loved it. Vader scared me. Yep, for sure. Yes, the flying monkeys in Wizard of Oz. I mean, just her laugh, just her cackle grabbed Thur's hammer. Like, it's insane. It's just, yes, Soul Assassin, the TV dresser. Those things were gigantic and heavy. Heavy. Yes, Pete's Dragon was another animated live action combination. So we're kind of seeing Disney go through cycles. The difference between obviously the 40s and now is a bit easier to point out. Walt Disney was alive in the 40s and the 50s. Walt Disney and Roy Disney were both alive. So there is a huge difference right there. But in 1950, what a lot of people do not realize is Cinderella had to be a hit. They needed it to do well. Because if it didn't do well, they were done. So, yes, Steamboat Willie, which is now in the public domain, Steamboat Willie started the company. And Snow White launched the company and proved they could be successful. But now, guess what? They were going to have to pin their hopes and their dreams on another princess with a glass slipper. Everybody wants to give Cinderella crap. First of all, we'll talk about the OG3. If you guys don't know what that means, the OG3 for Walt Disney are Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. Okay. Yes, there were other films, other shows, other things, other projects, but those were the three anchor points for Walt Disney. It is what allowed them to continue to function as a company, as a brand, and as the man himself to continue to tell stories. So Cinderella, when it came out in 1950, if this wasn't a hit, they were done. And so when you look at the story of Cinderella, everybody's like, oh, the prince had to save her, and he couldn't even come look for her himself. He sent a duke to do it. First of all, you've obviously never read the fairy tale that it's based off of. Yes, Walt Disney, they made some liberties with things. They took some liberties in the storytelling, and it worked. It took a story that had, because whilst kids can handle some horror elements, I mean, you don't think that evil stepmother looming in the doorway and then locking her stepdaughter in the tower to starve, you don't think that's horrifying? That's pretty horrifying to me. She can't get out. She can't call for help. She doesn't know if anybody's going to come and rescue her. She literally, she's powerless. She is a prisoner in her own home, in her father's home. Okay? So, when you look at the things that Cinderella went through, she was abused, she was neglected, she was belittled, she was demeaned. They talk about it at the very beginning of Cinderella. But even after all the terrible treatment she went through, even after having her clothes and her toys and her jewels and her mother's clothes and her father's possessions taken from her, she didn't let it harden her heart. She stayed kind. She stayed humble. She was a beautiful young woman. And now she has all these skills. She knows how to cook. She knows how to clean. She knows what it takes to run a kitchen. She knows what it takes to run a household. She knows how to clean. You'd be shocked. Maybe not any of you listening, but there is Gen Z. I brought this up on Twitter, and I need to find someone somewhere who has made a video or a TikTok or something to like save these kids from themselves. They're adding bleach and ammonia products. So they're taking straight bleach and they're adding it to ammonia-based products. That, for anybody that's curious, that's a death sentence. Like, how some of these people are still alive, I have no idea. And then Alasia, for any of you who don't know Alasia, she goes by A Troubled Green. She's on Instagram and she is on Twitter. She's wonderful. You should follow her. She said, she was like, the really sad part, she was like, my dad's assistant, or it was her grandpa's assistant, went to go like clean up an area. She was doing charity work. She was doing charity work, trying to help clean up some stuff like that. She took a bucket of bleach, or she took a bucket of bleach and she dropped straight ammonia right into it, and she was dead instantly, dropped to the floor, dead. It's literally a chemical weapon, and you have kids in Gen Z who are mixing cleaning products, and they're like, oh, did you know that all cleaners have disinfectants in them? And it's like, yes, that's on purpose so you don't melt your internal organs, Rebecca. Like, what are you? Oh my good God. And I forgot who pointed it out to me. I'm going to have to make a video on it because it's like the insanity of Gen Z. They think that they're discovering new things. Who would have thought that chemical warfare terrorism would be on the rise because Gen Z is trying to clean their floors? Good Lord. And so it makes mustard gas. Exactly. Yes, it's a chemical weapon. And so you have these kids who don't know how to clean. They don't know why all-purpose cleaners and disinfectants are separate. Guess who does know that? Cinderella knows that. Cinderella knows. She knows not to mix those things. And she knows how to make those floors sparkle. She knows how to sew. She made her own dress. Like, this gets so brutally overlooked because, yes, I know we get the beautiful transformation with the fairy godmother, and that dress is gorgeous and not something she could have done on her own. But she made that from scraps and bits, and she used a book and her heart and her imagination and her mind's eye. And look what she was capable of doing. She created something. She created that dress. And then, of course, evil, the stepsisters and the stepmother, they tore it apart because evil cannot create. It can only corrupt and deform. And out of their jealousy, out of their envy, they had spent all this time and all this money on their makeup and their dresses and their hair, and they still didn't look anywhere near as beautiful as Cinderella in a dress that she made in her attic room. That's a beautiful, like, that is perseverance. That is dedication. That is overcoming adversity. Yes, she had help from the mice. I know, we're not going to get it, but like, she started that whole process. It was because of her. All right? This was her vision. She wasn't going there to get rescued. Keep this in mind. She fully expected to go to the ball and come back to that same house and continue living the same life. She wanted one night to be different. And so she made that happen. She took that on herself. And then it was destroyed by her envious stepmother and stepsisters, because her stepmother didn't want her to go anywhere. She didn't want to lose a free servant. She was jealous of Cinderella. She was vain. She's incredibly vain. That's something that is in common with all of these villains. They're incredibly vain. They're incredibly prideful. And that's a kid's show. That was made for children, and adults to this day have loved it. And Cinderella was a huge success. So when people are like, oh, Cinderella went to the ball and she got rescued by the prince. No, that isn't what happened. You are skipping over the entirety of the story that built up to that point. And you're leaving out the fact that she had no intention of meeting the prince. She had no intent. Even when she meets the prince, she doesn't even know it's him. She is not there to escape her life permanently. She was there for a moment of escapism from a life that did not go the way that she had wanted it to. And that's what we're asking for in entertainment. Like, right now, we're Cinderella. And ironically enough, the Walt Disney Company and Hollywood in general, they're the evil stepmother and stepsisters, just beating the ever-loving bejesus out of us, ripping up our dresses, tearing us down, telling us, no, you can't go to the ball. No, you can't. You're going to stay here. You're going to clean. You're going to continue to live your life like this with no break. Because if you ever get a taste, because what she was really afraid of, what the wicked stepmother was really afraid of, was that if Cinderella ever realized that there was something better out there for her, she could leave. She could leave. But honest to God's truth, we're all Cinderella right now, getting stomped on by Hollywood, who is the evil stepmother and stepsisters. 100%. And the second that, and that's why they hate indie movements. That's why they want to try and get Indiegogo and now I can't think of the other website. You know what I'm talking about? Like, all of these indie startups, they try to get them in their pocket, or they try to do backdoor deals, or they try to shut them down for ridiculous they try to shut down campaigns for ridiculous violations. So you have someone like Eric July, who circumvented all of that. He created his own distribution, his own website. And that he made his own, he is his own fairy godmother. He made his own magic happen. Okay? I guess technically he'd be a fairy godfather. But he did that through hard work, dedication, perseverance. He's circumventing the mainstream, and he's being successful at it, because not only is he circumventing this, he knows that there is an audience. And the thing is, Hollywood knows this too. They just, at this point, they can't admit that they were wrong, because just like the evil stepmother, they are too prideful. But Eric's like, there is an entire customer base out there who are desperate for good stories, who are desperate for something different, who are desperate to get out from underneath this ridiculous, obscene, ideological, just nastiness, right? And that's amazing to see. Like, this is what Hollywood is afraid of, because when it becomes decentralized, Hollywood loses its power. That's why it mocks and makes fun of and tries to crush smaller creators, smaller studios, or it tries to absorb them. Right? That's that. If you can't beat them, make them join you. They're not going to, It's not beat them, join them. It's make them join you. Make them an offer they can't refuse. And that has worked for a lot of studios. We saw it happen with Pixar, who, by the way, they're about to go through layoffs. There's going to be less than 1,000 people working at Pixar. It literally helped save, and we'll get to that in a little bit. It literally helped save Walt Disney, or the company. It helped save Disney, the Walt Disney Company, and it is now about to operate with less than 1,000 people because they're not allowed to be creative. They're not allowed to tell stories the way that they want to. Everything has to have the agenda, the check boxes, and they are drowning. They are drowning. Again, hear what I just said. Pixar is about to have less than 1,000 people working at it. It's insane. It's on the decline. They had a captive audience. Like some places in Cali and other states and some parts of the world, they don't want to come out from COVID. They went into their cave during COVID and they don't want to come back out. They have no plans to come back out. They want everybody else to stay in their caves too. So, but for at least 6 months, these companies had a legitimate captured, not captive, captured audience. And they pissed it away. This should have been the time for them to grow and expand and pull things out of the vault that you haven't seen and to do creative shorts. This was the time when there was nowhere else to go. This was the time to be innovative. This was the time to try shorts and maybe go back to an animated live action combination and to try maybe like with what was the name of that? The Wish that just came out was supposed to be a celebration of 100 years of Disney. They pissed that away. It looked sloppy and lazy and unfinished. That was a show that they should have released during COVID, and then they could have gotten honest feedback. Tell me why, when you log into any of these streaming services, with the exception of Netflix. So if you guys don't know, Netflix, you can give a thumbs down, a thumbs up, or a double thumbs up nowadays. My father-in-law still has Netflix. And so if you like it, you can thumbs up. If you don't like it, you can thumbs down. But if you really like it and want recommendations in the same vein, you hit the double thumbs up. Okay? Well, Amazon has, I think, like their star system, but that's only personal. That doesn't actually rate overall the show. Okay? There's no live, like, here you go, Disney. If you need that innovative idea, direct instant feedback from your customers. I don't mean where they have to log in, sign in, fill out a form, and then send it into some email that's never going to get read. I mean legitimately, like, when it pops up at the end there and it says, what would you rate the simple question? What would you rate this film what would you rate this film on plot? What would you rate this film on storytelling? What would you rate this film on character development? What would you rate this film overall? 4 simple questions. That's all it would take. You'd get immediate direct feedback, but they don't want it. They can't handle it. They want no criticism, especially from us plebeians who should be so grateful and thankful that they have deigned to put in the effort to make things for us that we should just consume and enjoy. God forbid we have opinions of our own, because we just don't understand how truly hard it is to be in Hollywood. You made that bed. Now you all got to lay with those snakes. Okay? That is all on you. So after Cinderella was successful, they were able to move forward with Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, both wildly successful. Okay? Mary Blair, you've probably heard that name a lot, was the art director at the time and was using that classic, that particular animated look is very, like, you can tell it's very interesting when a new animated head takes over. Prior to 2010s because the style is very specific. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I know many of you know who Tony Bloom, who Bloom, I can't even talk. Bluth is. But so when she left in 1953, Lady and the Tramp got released. But because it had started to get into live action things, and they were opening Anaheim, California, Lady and the Tramp was allegedly going to be one of the last animated films for Disney. We've heard that before. If you guys remember, The Princess and the Frog, they said this is going to be the last traditional 2D animated film for Walt Disney ever. Well, they said the same thing about Lady and the Tramp in 1955. Let's see what happened. Live action films and later decline. So, they had their TV, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, like the Mickey Mouse Club, and then the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, and then Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Like, it had different names over the years, but it made sense. Less than 4 years after they announced that Lady and the Tramp was likely going to be one of their last full-length feature animated films, Sleeping Beauty came out in 1959 because Disney was struggling yet again. So, Snow White was the initial launch of success for Walt Disney. Cinderella saved the Walt Disney Company when they were about to go bankrupt in the 40s. And then, less than a decade later, Sleeping Beauty had to come in and save the day. And again, you look at Sleeping Beauty, and we are talking about a beautiful young girl who loves people and just wants and has grown up with her aunts and just wants to find true love and happiness. And she has grown up working and doing laundry and helping with the cooking. And, they make the jokes about how, oh, well, if I let her do it, it'll certainly burn. Okay? Like, they make those cracks. And so, Sleeping Beauty, once again, it was hanging on a princess's shoulders. These feminists, these wokes, these intersectionalists, they want to hate on Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. And yet it was these three princesses that are literally, they form the triangle base for everything that Walt Disney built off of that. I say again, yes, Steamboat Willie started, was their initial success. It's what got them looked at. It's what got them investors. But had it not been for Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty, the Walt Disney Company would likely not exist today. And 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Old Yeller, Darby O'Gill and the Little People, The Absent-Minded Professor, and The Incredible Journey were all well received, but did not make the money that was required. Did not make the money that Disney required in order to stay afloat. Do you know what did? Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty allowed them to make Mary Poppins, which became huge. This is also, yes, it's mostly live action, but it also has animation integrated into it, right? When they jump into the picture. So you have these fantastical, magical elements about it. You have animation involved in it alongside live action. And it won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actress for Julie Andrews. Like, it's insane. Now, this next part is such a foreign concept to modern Disney. It's like they are not. It's like a flip switched somewhere. A switch flipped. There we go. A switch flipped somewhere. Walt Disney was never a rich man by Hollywood standards, largely because he explained he valued perfection more than profits, much to the detriment of Roy. Let's be real. If Walt was left alone, he probably would not have been as successful. He needed Roy. That's the thing. Brothers, like family business, going into business with family, sticking together. Roy made sure that Walt didn't run himself and the company into the ground. A lot of this is on Roy, too. That was why they were so successful. They were able to depend on each other, right? But here is what Walt is known for saying, or credited with saying. I don't make movies to make money. I make money so I can make more movies. Utterly and completely different when mentality and approach than today's modern Disney. Modern Disney is literally, they've said they're churning out content because they need that money, whether it be ESG dollars from the government or money out of consumers' pockets, because that's what they see us as, consumers, not customers, not paying customers, not valued guests. No, they see us as consumers. They see us as where another source of revenue. That's what they see you as. They're not interested in telling stories. They are interested in getting your money, which is completely antithetical to everything that Walt Disney the man believed in. So after he died in December 15th, 1966, his company was in financial disarray. Obviously, like when a company head dies, it's usually devastating for the company. But he had planned ahead and he had put certain things in place. Now, right here, in 65, he purchased 43 acres of barren land in Central Florida for his most ambitious project, the Walt Disney World Resort. Roy Disney, who was his brother, assumed supervision of the project and opened the park in 1971 to great success. And in 1982, the experimental prototype Community of Tomorrow, known today as the Epcot Center, was incorporated into the park and immediately became one of the main attractions. Epcot was the last project that Walt Disney himself envisioned during his lifetime, and by the turn of the 21st century, it was attracting more than 10 million visitors annually. And that number, of course, skyrocketed until recently. I mean, the parks are way, way down. Now, during the 70s and 80s, this is where we're going to have to deter away from Botanica because they glossed over some stuff. So in the 70s and 80s, the Walt Disney Company realized its greatest profits from distribution of old films and from Disney World had become one of the world's leading tourist destinations, Disney World. Top animators such as Don Bluth, right? I mentioned him earlier. So Don Bluth, Gary Goldman, and John Pomeroy left the company in 1977. And I think because Don Bluth his animation is so incredible, a lot of people think that like The Secret of Nim and An American Tail, 50 Goes West, like An American Tail, like all of those films, they think that those are Disney films, and they're not. They're John Bluth films. And his animation style is so specific, and it was so ingrained in Walt Disney for that time period before he left, that people just assume that those are Disney films, but they're actually not. Now, of course, Disney has bought up a lot of studios that have some of those films now, but back then it wasn't Disney's, right? So, Disney subsequent efforts, such as animated feature The Fox and the Hound in 1981, failed in the eyes of many to capture what they thought as the magic of the studio's glory days. So they only bring up The Fox and the Hound. This is interesting because like the thumbnail that I had up, so many things came out in the 70s and 80s. So The Sword and the Stone came out in like 1963, but you have The Rescuers that came out in 1976, I believe. So you have The Rescuers, you have The Great Mouse Detective, you have oh gosh, what else was in my The Black Cauldron. All of these films, The Fox and the Hound, all these films are incredibly good films. They're the Brave Little Toaster is still, it's a terrifying movie. Like, it terrified me as a kid, but it's still really good. These films came out in the 80s. 101 Dalmatians actually came out in the 50s. Charlie Stevenson, I believe. 53. It's up here. 61. So 101 Dalmatians actually came out in the 60s. But, so the animators left. Disney started to topple. This is all they talk about. Like, they gloss over the 70s and 80s. They do not mention that this nearly bankrupted and tanked Disney. We're going to get to an article. You guys are going to laugh so hard when you see it. Ron Miller, Disney's son-in-law, is credited with initiating the company's resurgence because he went ahead. These films that you see here, Splash, Color of Money, Three Men and a Baby, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poet Society, Pretty Woman, Father of the Bride, Ed Wood, and The Horse Whisperer. He opened Touchstone Pictures, right? And then this allowed them to make these films without distorting the Disney family brand imagery, which, of course, they clearly don't care about nowadays because they're making strap-on jokes in Marvel films. But I digress. To in-universe 16-year-old girls. But Disney did not use its name on Touchstone Productions, and they also created Miramax, which of course they sold in 2010. Michael Eisner wrested power away from Miller as chairman of the board and company CEO, and began further expansion of the Disney empire. This is where 1984 stuff took a turn. So they have Hollywood Pictures and they have Miramax Films, and they turned out some bangers of some stuff, right? Well, now, of course, the revival, once again, A Princess Comes to Save the Day. The Little Mermaid is what saved Walt Disney Studios, because the mid 70s all through the 80s was not good. Was not a good decade and a half for Walt Disney Company at all. So here is a article from the New York Times from 1983. I don't want to see it in its original text, but look at this title. The Troubled World of Disney. The Troubled World of Disney. It hopes Epcot and its cable ventures will offset rough years in the movies. Okay? So, Walt Disney World is what slugged them through the 80s. That's how they survived. Was literally Walt Disney World. Without The Little Mermaid, Disney would have been dead in the 90s. It would have died. It's a far cry from Snow White, but come February, Walt Disney Productions will be bringing out a new comedy film called Splash, which will feature mermaids, nudity, and four-letter words. The plan has raised eyebrows in both Hollywood and Middle America. See, even back in the 80s, Middle America's getting hate. You bigots! We're such istophobes. We're such bigots. But even Hollywood was raising eyebrows, apparently. Nowadays, mermaids Splash is tame compared to what they do nowadays. But Disney is betting that it will also raise profits in the company's sagging film production unit, which has long been the biggest headache at the $1 billion family entertainment company. So remember, in the 80s, Walt Disney was a $1 billion family entertainment company. Disney acknowledges that the new movie signals quite a change for the company. Mickey Mouse is growing up. Oh, we've heard that before, haven't we? For a brand new audience. Says Disney's new chief executive, Ron Miller, a former professional football player married to one of Walt Disney's daughters. The maturing of Mickey comes at a time when the company itself has been showing signs of age and needs a dose of the energy that characterizes its cartoon characters and theme parks in California and Florida. Plagued by costly movie flops and high development costs for its new extravaganza, the one-year-old Epcot Center at Florida's Walt Disney World, Disney is struggling through its third consecutive year of declining earnings. For the first 9 months of the fiscal year, profits fell 5% to $68.7 million. In the 80s, yo! $68.7 million in the 80s. It's insane. In the most recent quarter, which ended June 30th, net income plummeted 35% to $21.4 million as losses in the movie division and high startup costs for its new cable operation dragged down earnings. They went to cable and it didn't work. They're trying to go to streaming and it doesn't work. It's almost like history repeats itself. It's almost like if you fail to learn from history, you're doomed to repeat the cycle. I don't know. I feel like someone much wiser than me said that once, but what do I know? I am just an istophobe from middle America. God forbid. Oh, I'm such a pleb. Questions abound as to whether the changes instituted in Mr. Miller's first year, ranging from new management team to the Disney Channel, the new cable operation to a franchise Disneyland in Tokyo, will be enough to ensure Disney one of its fabled happy endings. Despite the unquestionable success of Epcot Center, which has turned Disney's Florida operation into the nation's most heavily trafficked vacation resort, Disney remains a troubled concern. So, understand what happens here, something that doesn't get brought up. Disney, the company, okay, they had to pull in a lot of favors. Like the Disney Channel, everybody knows the Disney Channel nowadays. It was not always that way. Disney crushed a lot of competitors. They monopolized a lot of things. They bent a lot of rules. They had a lot of legislation passed to help them get to where they were for their TV, for their TV channel, for the Disney Channel. And you had to have, I didn't have the Disney Channel growing up. You had to have cable to get it, right? And now that a lot of people are cutting the cord, but now streaming, it's becoming the exact same thing as the cable wars back in the day. The difference is what we have now that they didn't have back in the 80s and 90s is social media and alternative platforms like YouTube, like right here. I'm not being broadcast on a news station anywhere. I'm not being sent out by any mainstream media outlets. This is an alternative platform. Regardless of how mainstream and well-known YouTube is, it is still, for right now, an alternative platform, which is killing them because they can't maneuver like this. They can't just at the drop of a hat do a live stream or at the drop of a hat drop a video with, outlining certain things. They could, but they won't because there's too much risk. There's too much brand damage. And in the 80s, they tried something different. Black Cauldron, it didn't work. Brave Little Toaster, didn't work. Fox and the Hound, it didn't work. But you look back, those films are incredible. They're so well done. The Rescuers, an incredible film. But The Great Mouse Detective is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. They tried something different. They were taking risks. They were taking risks as a company because they were trying to grow and expand and capture audiences without leaving. This is the big difference. Without leaving the old audience behind. Okay? But again, there's only so much you can do, and the 80s. there was a recession in the 80s too. Like, man, the amount of cycles of history, it's actually quite terrifying. However, it was because of Walt Disney World that they were able to survive, which was, I think, their attempted strategy for this go around, and it's not working. The parks are not bringing people in because the core, the Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Daisy Duck, Pluto, right? Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Ariel, they have essentially dug out the foundation of their house and expected it to still stand. That's what they've done. And they're apologizing for things that they don't need to apologize for. So Disney right now is chopping its own legs out from underneath it and digging out its own foundation. That is their biggest problem right now. They are their own worst enemy, and they will not fix it, again, because of pride. They should really go watch the original Cinderella movie. They would learn so much about themselves. Epcot might come to be viewed as just a one-shot upward blip for Disney's earnings. It turns out it wasn't. And Richard Simmons, an analyst at Goldman Sachs, says if there's excitement in the company, it has to come from the movie business and the Disney Channel. And there's not yet anything close to a consensus as to whether they will be successful. This is what Disney is dealing. Remember, This got written in 1983. This is what Disney is dealing with. Their brand is damaged. It's struggling. It's not doing what it should be doing, what it used to do. They pivoted away from certain elements of storytelling, but they still, like, you go back and you look, and there's still the core elements of what Walt Disney's blueprint is for a story. They're still there. But even in the 80s, it was the Midwest is raising eyebrows. Like, it's always the Midwest that they want to pee all over. Like, I don't understand. We're hardworking people who just want to have a little break from working our butts off every day. That's not a lot to ask. But apparently we don't deserve that in their eyes. Ridiculous. If they, referring to the films, if they're not successful, some analysts speculate that Disney Productions could one day become a ripe takeover candidate for investors more interested in its vast land holdings than in Mickey Mouse. We are literally hearing the same thing in today's climate. The difference is they're not pivoting. Disney is staying the course. They're not listening to their customers. They're not listening to their shareholders. They're not listening to their investors. They are determined to drive this shipwreck as deep down as they absolutely can. There are signs, however, that the dark clouds over Disney's empire may be on the verge of clearing. Although earnings fell sharply in recent quarters, sales rose 30%. Some analysts, citing gains at Epcot and Disney Channel, the company's 6-month-old cable unit, it's 6 months old at this point, okay, anticipate a strong fourth quarter, enough to push profits ahead of last year's $100.1 million or $3.01 a share. Oh my gosh, I wish I was alive in I was not born yet. That was my failure. My mom, what year was this? 1983 is when this article was written. My mom would have been in like junior high. So I wasn't alive yet. That was my bad. Should have bought steak in Disney and then sold it right after they purchased Star Wars, because they have not been that high since. Anyway, I think Endgame they had a spike, but it wouldn't have been worth it. So Lee Isger, the entertainment analyst at Payne Weber Mitchell Hitchens, said earnings from Epcot and Disney Channel could push profit shares to $4 to $5 range next year, possibly $8 to $10 a share in 1985. Lord of mercy. If Disney was only $10 a share, the company would cease to exist in today's world. Isn't that crazy? Guys, this is only 40 years ago. Not even 40. What year is it? 2020. It's 2023. So we're talking 35, 40 years. No, it's 40 years ago. That's crazy. That's insane. Oh my goodness. Disney's management is tight-lipped about its earnings outlook, but is clearly bullish on the momentum the company seems to have picked up this year. It's been the greatest year in the history of the company and very rewarding for us. Really? That same song, different tune. Instead of Mr. Miller, who was, again, Walt's son-in-law, now it's Bob Iger. Bobby Iger. Oh, man. Good Lord. Though few analysts share his boundless enthusiasm, there are grounds for optimism. Epcot has done better than expected. Yeah, because it was Walt's vision. Remember, Epcot was the very last thing created by the Disney Company that was Walt Disney's vision. Okay? So now they're talking about all these other things that essentially failed, by the way. With the exception, so Tokyo Disneyland, which opened in April 15th, okay? Disney's rich film library plus performances are taped at Epcot. The channel has 400,000 subscribers. Oh my gosh. They're talking about a cable network at this point. Like, isn't it crazy? Its success has resulted around the flood of proposals from businesses in every country in Europe for Disney to create Disneylands there, which, as we know, eventually become a success. It's so weird to read something from 1983 and they're trying to like guess. Like so much of this did not work. The 80s, as we saw in the previous in the Britannica information and what we've read and what like you can read from other articles, the 80s was a rough year for Walt Disney World, for the Walt Disney Company. They almost shut down. The Mormon Church is Florida's biggest landholder with more than 300,000 acres, but Bryce calculates that Disney's parcel is worth more. It definitely is now. Mormon Church may have more land in Florida, but Disney's land is definitely worth more. They disagree on how to calculate the land's value because when Disney bought 27,400 of its 28,000 acres in Florida in 65, it paid $200 an acre. Oh God, give me those land prices. Real estate brokers now say the property is worth more than $1 million an acre in its best locations based on recent hotel development nearby. Like, isn't it crazy? Like, again, because of where Walt Disney picked and because of what the vision he saw, he was literally able to create value where there was nothing standing before. That was what this man was able to do. Love him, hate him, indifferent to him. Walt Disney had a vision and he made it happen. And now they are pissing all over it. So, if you guys want to go like more in depth, that's a New York Times article from 1983. And the Britannica, you can look that up. But essentially, like Walt Disney talks about how had the Laugh-O-Gram company, the first company that he started, if that had not failed, if that had not gone under, he would not have become what he is or what he was at the day that he died. So it's crazy when you look at those parallels. So what is the difference between what happened in the 80s? Like the 90s was able to save Disney, the revival, the Renaissance. We've heard it many, many times. Many times you've heard about the 1990s is the Renaissance era of Disney. The 1990s was the revival of Disney starting in 89 with The Little Mermaid. The difference is they pivoted. They changed course. They leaned on another princess story. For all the screeching and harping and wailing and gnashing of teeth that these politically correct snowflakes want to cling to and their diversity checkboxes and their nihilism, the insane part is every time Disney was in trouble, it was a princess that bailed them out. Snow White started it. Cinderella saved them in the 50s. Sleeping Beauty saved them less than a decade later. And then Little Mermaid comes rolling around. Like, isn't it insane to think that a mermaid, a singing crab, a fish, a seagull, and a handsome prince saved Disney, along with, might I add, one of the best villains that Disney ever created, who was once again vain, prideful, and incredibly selfish. Like, Disney used to make good villains, and by that I mean very evil villains. Remember the premises of the blueprint for movies and filmmaking and storytelling that Walt set forth. Younger audiences can handle horror. They can handle truly evil villains. They can handle their hero, getting knocked down as long as good triumphs in the end. As long as good overcomes. Nowadays, you've got perfect example is Wanda. She tortured an entire town for months. We don't actually know the exact amount of time that she tortured those people. Every day in and day out, she tortured those people. And then it was, oh, well, they'll never understand your sacrifice. I am fairly sure that she's not the only person that has ever lost a husband or has never who's lost children that weren't even her children. Like, I'm fairly certain she's not the only woman who's ever gone through that. They didn't burn the entire world, multiple universes down, screaming and pitching a fit so that they could live their delusion. If there was ever a perfect, what is the word? I don't know. Not comparison. To the minds of these people at like, this is what they're willing to do in order for their delusions to be reinforced. It's WandaVision. They are literally willing to enslave, torture, maim, manipulate, and destroy so that they can continue living a lie and think that they are the heroes. Because remember, at the end of WandaVision, she was told by Monica Rambeau, they'll never know what you gave up for them. She just murdered a bunch of people, real people. Lex Luthor is less evil than this bitch. The storytelling is not there. You cannot look at the Marvels and then look at Bedknobs and Broomsticks or Mary Poppins and say that they are anywhere close to the same caliber. You can't look at What If and tell me that that's anywhere in the same vein as the Black Cauldron or the Fox and the Hound. You can't. It is impossible. You are lying. You're lying. So you've got WandaVision, and then you have Doctor Strange multiverse in the Multiverse of Madness, where she's still the villain. Like, this isn't anything. She's the villain. She's not good. We just had Echo came out this week. If you guys haven't seen the FNT episode from tonight, you can go watch it and get everybody else's thoughts on it. But the insane part is she was psychotic since she was a kid. She tortured a bird. She watched her non-blood uncle literally beat an ice cream vendor to a bloody pulp, and then ran over and kicked the ice cream vendor. Like, this is not a good individual. And then you go through it at the 5 episodes, which were so just ungodly, ridiculously boring. But she's doing hits for Kingpin. She is she's one of Kingpin's assassins. Doesn't make any sense. She doesn't, as far as I can tell, her superpowers are, did not come into play until she went back to Oklahoma. So that means all the years leading up to the 20 years before she went back to Oklahoma, she didn't have access to these powers, and yet she was one of the most prolific, best hitters in Kingpin's organization. She took on Daredevil and Hawkman, for the love of God. Hawkeye, sorry, not Hawkman. That's DC. She took on Hawkeye, and she took on Daredevil, and essentially she was able to walk away. It's crazy when you look at it. When you look at everything that they have pushed out in the last decade, they ruined Endgame. They ruined Captain America, because Steve would have never, ever abandoned his duty to go back in time to be with his, that wasn't his destiny. They turned Captain America into a fucking villain. He was incredibly selfish. That's that. Steve Rogers, the villain. That's what they did to him. He went back in time, abandoned all of his duties, abandoned all of his responsibilities, which was never in it. Remember, if you go back to Captain America, the first Avenger, it's not Captain Marvel, that is for damn sure. When you go back to that first Captain America movie, he throws himself on what he believes is a live grenade to save the lives of all these other men in this training unit that have treated him horribly. He would have never, ever, Steve Rogers would never have gone back in time and walked away from all of that responsibility. He would have never burdened somebody else with that level of responsibility unless he had absolutely no choice, like he's dying. He would not have willingly gone back in time to escape all of that. It's absurd. They destroyed his character. They destroyed his arc. They destroyed him, and they turned him into a villain. They turned Thor into a lazy villain. And then when we got Thor Love and Thunder, oh god, Thor Love and Thunder. Jane is a villain. I don't know if you all caught that, but Jane's very much a villain. Valkyrie, very much a villain. They're writing these women as villains. These women are incredibly vain. They're incredibly prideful. They have no humility. They have no grace. They have no poise. They have no dignity. And they have no care for the sanctity of human life around them, which heroes are supposed to have. You're trying to save lives, not destroy them. And instead, you've got Captain Marvel committed mass genocide and knew it. Valkyrie has been essentially using her position as king, which makes no freaking sense, to wine and dine and get fat. And it's like, oh, well, she took the scrolls to the one. Like, no. Pay attention. She didn't do that for herself. She did it so she could call in a favor later. That came with strings. That wasn't because she was being a hero. That came with strings. I can't. And then you've got all these misunderstood here. Like, Black Widow, at least we had established, like, there was effort put into that story. Not the movie. I'm not talking about the movie. But, like, her character. Before the Black Widow film, which was a waste of time and money, she had been established. She had gone through stuff. She was trying to do better. She knew she was a villain. She was trying to redeem herself. She wasn't pretending to be something she wasn't. Right? She was a spy. She was a killer. That's who she was. And she was trying to forgive herself and make amends and figure out a way to overcome that. That's a noble quest. That's something that you should seek to do. Like, that makes sense. And they pissed that away in Black Widow. And they made horrific menstruation jokes. Like, I still cannot believe that they put that in a Marvel movie. Like, I'm just floored at all of it. So there is no way that you can look. Disney has not had an animated full-length feature film, a traditional full-length animated feature film, 2D. Yes, we've had the Pixar films, but Pixar, like I said, they're doing layoffs. Pixar is about to go through shrinkage. They're about to have less than 1,000 people in their studio. And they have Elemental, Turning Red, all of these other things that all this crap content that they've pushed out. I mean, they're literally re-releasing. They are re-releasing Soul, Inside Out, and I forget. I don't remember what the other one is. But stuff that they released during COVID that was popular, they're going to put it in theaters in hopes that people will go to theaters to see those movies that were not necessarily, like, Soul is not a bad movie. Soul's a good movie. It is not The Little Mermaid. It's not Beauty and the Beast. It's not Aladdin. It's not The Lion King. You can call it whatever you like. But Disney is not just suffering from a loss of returns in money. They have no talent. They have no team that actually is invested in storytelling. They have men and women in charge of their studios that are not interested in anything except making themselves money and checking boxes and getting records. Because here's the thing, those people know that they are not talented enough. They'll never pull off. Right now, they will never pull off a Mary Poppins. They know they're not talented enough to pull off a Mary Poppins. They can't get nominated for, I think it got nominated for like 13 Academy Awards and it won 5. They don't have that in them. They haven't got it. There's no creativity left. There's no passion. There's no drive. There's no desire to be that successful ever again. Why would they? Why would they when they can just get their ESG money? Why would they when they can just continue to get sales off of plushie dolls and Funko Pops? Why would they when they can just literally drive the corpse of these IPs into the ground and squeeze them for every cent they have, like trying to get water from a stone? Why put in the effort? Why take any kind of risk? Why try to reimagine? What is it? They call themselves like the Imagineers or whatever. Why go through all of that when you can just hide behind the corporate media? You can hide behind your previous success, and you can continue calling paying customers horrible things in order to justify your own failure. Like, it's crazy. But if you remember from the clip at the beginning of the stream, the women's voting, like the one of the communist organizations that was coming after him, it was women. Guess who is helping destroy Hollywood all over again with the Me Too Time's Up movement? Women, fake victims. They're hurting real victims. We all know that Hollywood is a cesspit. We all know that. We know it is a den of vipers. We get it. But when you lie about especially that, all you are doing is hurting the women who actually suffer through it. That's all you are doing. And it's they have lost their way. They are too wrapped up in seeing themselves on the screen. I mean, perfect example of this is Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy wishes she was British. That I think that's her one thing that she wishes she could change about herself, because that is the protagonist in all of her stories. A white, brunette, brown-eyed British woman. It's her. She wants to see herself on screen. She wants to see her story told the way she sees herself is the way that she wants the world to see her, that she's this incredible, powerful, snarky, smart, sassy, independent woman who can do anything the men can do because she's been in there. She's been at Lucasfilm. She's worked on these projects for decades. You know, this is her time to shine, and she's going to let the world know it. And she allowed all of that false praise to get to her head, because people were not excited about the new Disney Star Wars trilogy because of her. They were excited because of what had come before, the prequels and the original trilogy. The games, the books, the EU, the extended universe. Like, when she decanonized it, that was the signal for anybody that was willing to pay attention. So the writing has been on the wall for a long, long time. And that is the biggest difference. The whole crux of this: Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Cinderella, and The Little Mermaid are all princesses. And they were all able to save the Walt Disney Company because Walt Disney realized their mistake and went back to its roots and went back to that storytelling, went back to those those themes that speak to all of us as human beings. Went back to good triumphing over evil, a very obvious and clear villain, and a very obvious and clear hero who acts like a hero, who has to overcome challenges. Some are internal, some are external. But in order to become a hero that's worthy of the princess, or worthy of the crown, or worthy of legs, or worthy of making it to the ball. Cinderella, the fairy godmother didn't show up because the fairy godmother felt bad for Cinderella. She showed up because all her life, Cinderella had always served others, had always been kind, had always been caring. And now, because she had finally taken charge and made something happen for herself, and decided that she was going to be the one to get herself to the ball, and she was going to make her own dress, and then it was destroyed by these vapid, vain, horrid women. The fairy godmother was like, you've earned this. This is your reward for everything you've done, for all of the hard work. Okay? I'm just giving you the dress. You go to the ball and make do with what you can. And she ended up meeting the prince, right? Snow White, she was kind, she was considerate, she was humble. She had skills. She was capable. She could run a household. Remember, she helped the dwarves clean up their homes. She cooked for them. She took care of their house. She made sure they had food. She made sure that they were hygienic, right? She did all of these things. She was caring. She was nurturing. She was kind. And the men in those movies, or in those stories, depending, like, you don't see it that much in Snow White, but her kindness melted their hearts. They found a place in their hearts for her and wanted to protect her, and so they worked hard for her, and they agreed to keep her hidden. In Cinderella, the prince falls in love with her because she's kind and she's different and she's beautiful, and she wasn't showing up and trying to bow and show off her assets to the prince, right? She didn't have one of those. Do you guys remember the evil stepsisters? I forget what they're called, but it's the big thing that goes on the like rump of the dress to make your butt look bigger, or what have you, or to make your hips, so that the movement of your hips would be more exaggerated. She didn't have that. She had a very classic, very beautiful, very elegant, very simple white gown. I know that they make it blue, but it's actually it's a silver gown. So she had this beautiful silver gown, and then as they danced and as they spent time together, he wanted to get to know her more, and then he finds out that she didn't dance with him because he's the prince. She didn't even know he was the prince, and so that intrigued him even more, right? And then you've got Sleeping Beauty. It was the same thing. The prince was drawn in by her beautiful voice. She was just being herself. She was being kind. She was spending time with the forest, and she was doing something kind for her aunt. Like, her aunts were like, go out and pick some berries. Like, she was running an errand for her aunts. She was serving her aunts. She was helping out the household. And she used her gifts, because remember, she was gifted her voice. She was using her gift for the animals in the forest. So she was giving of herself to others in every way that she could. And then, of course, when Prince Philip, finds her and they dance, and, they fall head over heels, and they're in love, and they don't even realize that they've fallen in love with the person that they are betrothed to. And when you think about, quite frankly, Prince Philip does not get enough credit. He was imprisoned, slayed a dragon, and rode over brambles and thickets and escaped goblins to get to Aurora so that he could rescue her. Like, Prince Philip does not get enough credit at all. But it's incredible to me that people look at those stories and think that they are oppressive or old-fashioned or outdated. No, those stories, those themes, they speak to us on a completely different level. It speaks to the soul. It surpasses all of the superficial. It transcends all of that so that you can get to the human experience. And that's what made Disney so successful. But back then, there was at least enough accountability and enough desire to see true success and an actual talent and love for storytelling to make the necessary changes. He doesn't have that anymore. And that is the biggest difference between what happened in the 80s and the 50s and the 40s and now. Like, that is genuinely the biggest difference. Do you honestly, like, think about this? Do you genuinely believe that Disney would be willing to, here, let me put it. Would Disney be willing to make a classic 2D animation princess film like Snow White? A brand new princess movie. Would they bring in animators? Would they admit that they were wrong? And would they start over? Hang on. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Give me 1 second. There we go. Ta-da! Think about the leadership that they have right now. Do you honestly think that they would admit that that would have to change? I don't know. I'm just a plebeian from Middle America, so who knows? But maybe you guys are much more optimistic than I am. I don't know. But that is kind of what we wanted to talk about tonight. If you guys hear if you guys ever hear that, well, Disney almost went bankrupt in the 80s and, you know, they were able to turn things around. Okay, but they had just opened Walt Disney World. They had just opened the Tokyo Disney World, like Disneyland in Tokyo. So they had just started doing, these were new things. They're not new anymore. They're not innovative anymore. Disney knows that. They have already, their Disney Star Wars hotel failed. It's closed. It didn't last a year. They can't sell Disney Star Wars merch. There is no hype for the Disney Star Wars anything. Disney Marvel did not turn a profit at all this year. And like Guardians of the Galaxy 3 made money, but it was the only one. And it wasn't enough to cancel out the flops. It wasn't enough to cancel out all of the losses. Pixar is about to be shrunk. They haven't had a hit in I don't know how long. And now you hear we've got Frozen 3, 4, and 5 are in production. Toy Story 6 is in production. Like they're making more sequels upon sequels upon sequels. Like there is nothing new left. There's nothing going on. They're not innovating. They're not exploring. They're not trying anything different. They're not taking risks. They're attempting to nickel and dime people instead of stepping back and being imaginative and finding a creative solution. And by creative solution, I don't mean creatively cooking the books, creative accounting. I mean actually finding a solution. And the crazy thing is, we live in a capitalist society, though oligarchs are desperately trying to squeeze everybody out. But here's the thing. This economic system that we live in, it's not like, yes, I know there's market share. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's not like there's only one pie and everybody gets a slice of that same pie. If if you're not happy with the pie, say it's, I don't know, I really like all pies, but let's say it's a lemon meringue pie and you don't like the lemon meringue pie. It's not working for you. You've tried to make it work for your business, like for your business model. You've tried to sell the lemon meringue pie. It is not working. So you're going to go make a chocolate cream pie instead. Like, you don't have to try and get a bigger slice of the lemon meringue pie and fight and claw, everybody else to try and get a bigger piece or a bigger slice. You can literally just go make a new pie. You can create something new, something more. But they don't want to do that. They don't want to make a new pie. They want the already existing pie, because making a new pie is hard. And maybe not everybody, like, maybe people won't like the chocolate cream pie. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this lemon meringue pie, but we're going to change it into like a lemon curd pie. We're going to like infuse it with a bunch of stuff. So it'll be a lemon pie, but we're going to put orange juice and some boba and some raisins in there. And then when people complain, we're going to say, well, it's a lemon meringue pie. This is what it's always been. And you're sitting there and you're like, no, like there's crap in here that doesn't belong in here. This isn't the lemon meringue pie that we've always had. This is something lemon turd pie. There we go. They're putting turds in the lemon meringue, and they're like, no, it's the exact same pie. And you're like, dude, I'm not stupid. Like, I know this isn't the same. This isn't the same Star Wars. This isn't the same Marvel. These aren't the same stories. And you've admitted that you're putting activism in front of everything. So why would I ever believe that this is still the same lemon meringue pie that you've always served? Because, see, that's what Disney has failed to do. They've shoved turds into all of their pies. And so, because the modern audience has claimed that they love turd pies, but they're not eating the turd pies, and the audience that built them into what they are never wanted, never asked for, and refuses the turd pies. But, maybe a couple slices, maybe they get lucky and there's not a turd in this one, so I guess it's okay. Like, it's insane. It's crazy. They're sitting there gaslighting the ever-loving piss out of their customer base. And like, well, if you don't like it, you're the problem. Like, no, that's not how business has ever worked. Ever. The paying customer is who you are trying to please and appease. They are who you are trying to get to buy your pie. Okay? If you start shoving turds in your pies, people are not going to come buy them. Unless they've got a weird fetish, which, guess what? That's who Disney has left. They've got the people with the weird fetishes who want to see themselves on screen and see a whole lot of weird things. Like, I know we've talked about this, but the Raylos are psychotic. Like, the fact that you want to, the fact that they literally threatened a man's wife and newborn child because their on-screen delusions had to be reinforced in real life, and they needed Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver to be together in real life to make them satisfied or whatever. That is psychotic. When you cannot separate fantasy and fiction from reality, when you threaten the life of a man's wife and daughter or newborn child because they are, quote, an obstacle to what you need to be happy, you're fucking insane. You need to go give yourself a nice hug in a white jacket, and you need to go into a room that has mattresses all around so that you can sleep in any position you like until those very weird, bad dreams leave your head and you realize that they were inappropriate and you should not say those things out loud to people. Like, honest to God, how psychotic do you have to be? And we can go back into this because the media tries to gaslight again. Jar Jar Binks, the Ahmed Best, who was the character for Jar Jar Binks. The media is who mocked and belittled and slandered Jar Jar Binks and made him miserable. It was the media, because remember, it's like, yes, we had the internet, and yes, there were fan boards, but they were nothing like the social media of today. Most of those, most stars didn't even know that those boards existed. As evidence, when Ian McClellan was like, I didn't even know that these people were saying these things until someone literally copy pasted and emailed it to me. Like, that's how he found out about it. And so it's like, it was proof that these stars did not know about these comment boards. They didn't know about these fan boards. And it was the media who bullied Jake Lloyd, the kid who played young Skywalker, young Anakin. It was the media that bullied him and belittled him and trashed him and drug his name through the mud. Because they don't care who they hurt. They just want to sell papers. They just want to be sensationalized. They want their name to be remembered. Well, it's going to be remembered, but not for anything good. And the crazy part is, allegedly, I don't have any proof of this. I've never spoken to George Lucas in my life. But allegedly, George's plan, because a lot of people, if you watch from episode 1 to episode 2, because Darth Maul, spoilers, I guess, Darth Maul dies in episode 1. And then Count Dooku comes out of nowhere in episode 2. And it's like, well, I thought there was only 2. One master and one apprentice. Like, where did Count Dooku come from? And he's like old. So like, where did this guy come from? Allegedly, what was supposed to happen, excuse me, was that Darth Maul was not the true apprentice of Darth Sidious. What was supposed to happen, and that's also why, if you remember in episode 3, when Padme gives her the power of her chair to Jar Jar, that was supposed to be much more sinister, because it was supposed to be revealed that Jar Jar had been working for Sidious the entire time. Jar Jar was going to turn around and actually be a Sith Lord. Which would have been crazy and insane and would have made so much, like, when you go back, like, if you didn't know that before, go back and watch the prequel series, the prequel trilogy now, and be like, oh my God, that actually makes sense, because he was given the power of the chair in the Senate. He did get, he was the one who pushed the Senate to make these certain changes and implement these certain decisions and these certain maneuvers. And it was supposed to benefit Naboo and the Republic. It was supposed to be for the good of the Republic. And then it was going to be revealed that because it had to be Senator Amidala's idea. It had to be her idea to give it to Jar Jar. Like, certain things had to go into motion. Certain things had to be in play, right? Because the right pressure points had to get hit, so that it would be her idea to turn this over to Jar Jar. And when it was all said and done, it was supposed to be Darth Binks. Like, it would have been him. It would have turned out that he had been keeping an eye on Anakin all these years. That he had been reporting back to Darth Sidious what he'd seen, what he'd known, like all of these things. He was actually working for Darth Sidious the entire time. And it makes so much more sense, and it also explains why Count Dooku was so jarring, because he just appeared, and he was the Emperor's apprentice, right? And you're like, man, that just feels off somehow. Like, it just feels really abrupt. Well, it's because all of the backlash that George Lucas got. Because, well, Jar Jar is over the top with the Three Stooges type comedy, and he's so stupid, and Jar Jar is this and Jar Jar is that, and Jake Lloyd is too young, and Anakin is too young, and why did you make Anakin a kid, and why do we need this, and the midichlorians are stupid, and this is stupid. Jake Lloyd went through drug and alcohol abuse because of what the media did to him. Don't ever let them gaslight you. It was not fans. It was not people that went to the movies. It was not us. It was 100% the media who were, I don't know if they were just out to get George. I mean, we saw Walt Disney testified. We saw what they were willing to do to Walt Disney. Chappelle he did a whole stand-up bit about how if you don't do this when you get on that plane, by the time you land, your name is going to be smeared. And it was. And he was like, F you, I'm not doing it. And then Dave Chappelle got on the plane, and then by the time he landed, he was smeared in the media. It took 4 hours. Took 4 hours. That is how powerful that weapon is, and that is why they hate social media and alternative platforms, and why they're so desperate to get controlling interests in those alternative platforms and in social media, specifically at I don't even think people realize that Elon Musk buying Twitter and changing it and making it X and doing what he has been doing, they do not even realize how much he's actually done. And it literally changed the course of history. Literally changed the course of history, and I'm not being facetious. Yeah, it's just a social media platform. Yeah, you can't really, can you really do it? But we've seen the power of social media. It cost people their jobs. It cost people their livelihoods. It's gotten people in jail. When the coof was going around before Elon bought the platform, do you guys remember? You couldn't say anything. You could say nothing against the science. You couldn't say anything against the ABC community. You couldn't say anything. Or, I mean, Kara just had her cancelversary last Saturday. She literally got canceled for an opinion. It's very real. As we've said, as I said earlier in this live stream, these people they are Wanda from WandaVision. They will belittle, maim, enslave, torture, massacre, and burn and destroy anything they have to so that their delusions can continue, because they cannot or will not deal with reality, that they aren't that great, that they aren't that special, that they're not that important, that they're not fascinating and exotic and wonderful and perfect. They're not Mary Pop. They're not practically perfect in every way. They are, in fact, flawed individuals, very flawed individuals who have a lot of anger issues. It's crazy. Not because, so she said she wanted to play the game, but it was her opinion of, I don't care what such and such said or did. It was the, I don't care about all the drama around it. That is what got her in trouble. That's where she got canked. But it's just insane when you look back on just the past couple of years. These people very much demand that you reinforce their delusions because they can't handle reality. They can't. Most of them can't. Some of them just don't want to. And the problem that comes in is, no matter how much you were, even if everybody in the world accommodated these people and everybody in the world reinforced their delusions and they got everything that they wanted, they still wouldn't be happy. They still wouldn't be happy. It would never be enough. And they would continue to spiral and spiral and spiral, and it would be everybody else's fault until they hit rock bottom and they're either dead, in jail, in the hospital, or they actually finally get the help that they need. So it's getting to a point where even they can't deny the reality anymore. And so they're pushing more heavily and more fervently, and they're trying so badly to deny everything. Because the second that they admit that they are their own problem, that they are their own worst enemy, that no matter how many tattoos or piercings or dye jobs or how much hair they refuse to shave or how much hair they shave off from their head, like how many buzz cuts or how many body parts they chop off or how many graphic t-shirts they wear or how many f-bombs they drop or how much they scream into the abyss or at anybody that they deem I don't know, problematic. I hate that word, but for lack of a better word, no matter how much they do all of those things, they're not dealing with the core issues. They're not fixing anything, least of all themselves and least of all their own problems. So to hide behind Walt Disney, the company, and then claim that everybody else is the shill, everybody else is the problem, that capitalism is bad, that big business is bad, but yet you're hiding behind Minnie Mouse ears and a Mickey Mouse mask and these weird furry costumes and stuff like that. It's such a contradiction of itself. They are their own worst enemies. And I honestly, like, I want people to be healthy. I want people to be happy. But God helps those who helps themselves. Like, you can't sit there and do nothing when you want to affect change. You got to be Cinderella. You got to go make that dress to get yourself to that ball. Take what skills and what knowledge and what talents you have and put them to work. If you have none, then do start from scratch. Like, that's what you got to do. Find something that you're genuinely interested in. First of all, you got to have a conversation with yourself. You got to have a conversation with yourself and figure out what it is that what do you dislike, what do you like, what do you love, and what are you incredibly passionate about? And then from there, first of all, you need to get basic skills like don't mix bleach and ammonia. That's mustard gas. You're going to kill yourself and everybody in the vicinity. That's literally chemical warfare, World War I style. That's some Nazi stuff right there if there ever was one. Or if there ever was any. Mustard gas. Ayo. So don't do that. So maybe a good place to start is safe cleaning habits and tips. Like, also, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you're never supposed to clean urine, pee. You're never supposed to clean that with bleach either, because that's also ammonia. Like, I was watching so I am allergic to cats, like deathly allergic to cats. And I was watching one of my friends, and her little black cat's name, can't remember if it was Biscuit or Oreo. Something, it was a food. It was a tiny little thing that you eat, but it was the cat's name. And this is when I was stationed out in California. And she's walking over to the litter box to clean it with a bottle of bleach. And I literally, like, ripped, she hadn't opened it yet, thank God. I ripped the bleach out of her hands and I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, I was cleaning the cat litter box. She was like, she's like, it's Saturday. Like, I have to clean it. And I was like, why are you using bleach? And she's like, oh, well, I ran out of the Lysol wipes. Because she would, the wipes that you pull out. She's like, I ran out of wipes, so I just figured I'd grab this. And I had to explain to her that you can't mix ammonia and bleach. Because she would have, if she might not have killed us both, but we would have both been weeping and her skin would have been on fire. And I was pregnant at the time, so that would have been awful for my developing child if I didn't die. Because obviously, my child would have died with me. All because she wanted to clean cat pee with bleach. Don't do that. Do not clean pee with bleach. Like, I can't believe that this has to be explained, but this is the world we live in. And it's crazy. I now understand why they dilute cleaning materials so much, because I found, so I'm going off on a tangent, I realized, but I found Deep Clean My House With Me YouTube, and I started going down a rabbit hole. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching women, these are not children, these are not teenagers, these are like 25-year-olds adding bleach to Mr. Clean, which is an ammonia-based product. And then they're talking about how it gives such a nice sheen to everything. I think on Twitter, I'm gonna have to find it, but like I went insane. I quote tweeted myself. I did threads. Like, I went crazy. But I was like, yeah, it gives a nice sheen to everything, including your internal organs as they melt. Like, it's crazy. Just lack of basic knowledge. Lack of basic common sense and knowledge. Like, I can't even tell you when I learned that you don't mix cleaning materials, period, but you certainly don't mix ammonia and bleach. I don't even know. It just feels like that's something I've known my whole life because it was reinforced so much as I was growing up. And so it just floors me that people don't know this. Like, it blows my mind. There's a reason that general cleaners, you're supposed to clean with general cleaners first and then go through with your disinfectant after you've made sure you've wiped down with water. So you do the general cleaner, you wipe down with water, and then you go through with your disinfectant. Like, that's how it's supposed to be done. Because it gets everything clean. So the general cleaner gets all the muck and the grime and the nastiness. And then you wipe the counter down or the table, that whatever it is, with water. And then you go in with your disinfectant. And that is so your general cleaner and your disinfectant don't mix. And it's crazy to me that now we've got 23-year-olds literally dropping bleach into ammonia products. Like, oh my gosh. It's crazy to me. So I recommend, if you really, like, you need to have an honest to God conversation with yourself and with Jesus, but you need to have an honest to God conversation with yourself. You need to figure some stuff out. You need to recognize where your knowledge gaps are, and you're never going to be able to fill all of your knowledge gaps. That's why you're supposed to find a partner who complements you and you guys can help each other out. But you need to figure out what it is you really love and what you're passionate about. And then make your own pie. Make it profitable. And it's never been easier. It's never been easier. The internet is filled with information. Some good, some bad, some very ugly. But you can start a website. You can start an online company. You like for very little startup cost. It's legitimately never been easier. It's never been easier to self-publish. It's never been easier to self-promote. It has never been easier to do any of these things. And yet people will come up with excuse after excuse after excuse of why they're not doing it. Sometimes it's reasons, but more often than not, it's an excuse. Well, I just don't have time because, well, I need to go out with my friends, or I have to go shopping, or I'm just too tired from working my part-time job, and so I'm gonna go get a coffee, and then I'm gonna take a nap, and then I'm gonna, like, it's all of these things. Like, they're procrastinating, they're filling their time with distractions that take them away from their main goal. And then you have people like I have a family member, it's my aunt. She doesn't quilt anymore because she's been fighting breast cancer for 3.5 years. And she's exhausted from the chemo. She's exhausted from the medication. Like, so chemo is poison. Don't let them lie to you. So she's exhausted from the medication. She's exhausted from the travel. She's exhausted from being sick. Like, she's sick of being sick, if that makes sense. So she doesn't have the energy to quilt anymore. And the few days that she does, oh man, she gets as much in as she can because it still brings her joy. She still loves it. But she can't do it like she used to. And she always says, if I had known that, because her plan was she was going to work, she was going to retire, and in retirement, she was going to quilt. That was her plan. And she looks back now and she's like, if I had known that I wasn't going to be able to do this, she's like, I would have made so much more time for quilting. She made time for her family. I've got 3 cousins that now have kids of their own. Like, she's as involved as she possibly can be as a grandma and a mom still, but she was always very active in that aspect. She always was there. But she says she was like, she's like, I just think about how I could have, like, sold my quilts if I had the internet back then like I do now, because then I wouldn't have needed to buy a store to set everything up and then to display my quilts and then hope that a customer would walk in. I could just make the quilts, put them up, and sell them as is. And obviously it's much more complicated than that, but really it's that simple. Get your idea, whether it's drawing, sewing, quilting, knitting, writing, painting, clay, metal, any of that stuff. Like, if that's what you love to do, create it. Create several pieces, or write your book, like whatever it might be, your comic, your book, your metalwork, your woodwork, your furniture. Make some pieces. Get, there's YouTube videos, and I know it's like, oh, well, this YouTube video on marketing only has like 3,000 views. Yeah, but you know what? The brilliant thing about some of those videos that don't have as many views, have you guys ever noticed, like, accounts seem to say and have very similar beats and stuff that goes viral, like the trends that go viral and stuff like that? Don't get me wrong, you're still gonna have to jump on some trends, but if you manage to find a gold nugget that not everybody else has exploited and mined to death, then you're going to be able to stand out better. And you're going to be able to utilize that information more effectively. So I wouldn't knock a marketing or a startup info or a website business, a website-based business video. I wouldn't knock it until I watched it. Because even if it gives bad advice, you can learn what not to do as well. So keep that in mind too. Yes, I agree. Yes, Mighty Wolf, the marketing can be hard, but that's when you've got to step outside your comfort zone, and you can go check out books from the library for free on marketing. If you read 10 minutes on one subject, 10 minutes a day, 7 days a week on a subject for 7 years, you will be considered a subject matter expert in that topic. So imagine if you read for 30 minutes a day, or an hour a day, or 90 minutes a day for 7 days a week. You could cut that down to 2 years. Knowledge is incredibly powerful. Don't waste it. You have a supercomputer in your pocket. Utilize it. Go back to Walt Disney, the man. His first company went bankrupt. If he had given up right there, we wouldn't even be having this conversation today about Disney Marvel, about Disney Star Wars, about Steamboat Willie being part of the public domain, about how Disney is repeating itself, but it's different in this cycle because they're refusing to go back to their roots like they did in the past when they had to save themselves, or the fact that they'll never make a classic 2D animated princess film again because they would have to admit that they were wrong, and they won't do it. They don't have the humility to do it. The only thing that might save them is this Nelson Peltz, Ike Perlmutter takeover. It might actually save Disney if they pull it off and go back to the drawing board and literally gut that entire company and start back over. Maybe. But that's going to be a huge undertaking. And all the goodwill has been burned up. So they have to keep that in mind as well. But guys, there's so much information out there. Some of it is not good information, but remember, you can learn what not to do, and that can be just as valuable as what to do. Go to the library, use your resources. The internet is in your pocket. Like, what I would recommend doing, get a notebook and just start brainstorming and writing down things that, like, spend 2 minutes on, or spend 90 seconds on a list of things that you don't like, 90 seconds on a list of things you do like, 90 seconds on things you love, and 90 seconds on something really passionate that you're passionate about. It should take you the full 90 seconds to maybe really consider, but there should only be 1 or 2 things in like that passion column, I would think, because otherwise you're going to spread yourself too thin. But the idea that well, this is all there is, so we have to fight for the scraps, that is a loser mentality. And that is what Disney is dealing. Disney has a loser mentality right now. The Walt Disney Company is its own worst enemy. They have a losing mindset right now. You do not have to be that way. And it doesn't matter if you are 4, 14, 44, 84, however old you are. Utilize what you have. Think about what your skills and experience and your skill level and your experience level. And if you need to increase them, do so. If you have no experience, if you have no skill level, get some. Well, how are we supposed to do that? You guys are going to laugh so hard when I say this, but like, go get an internship. Hopefully a paid internship, but go get an internship. Go to tech school, get some knowledge. Learn about woodworking, learn about carpentry, learn about electrical, learn about plumbing, learn about the different metalworking, welding, learn about fishing, learn about hunting, learn about anything. Something that will give you a little bit of exposure and experience, and something that's going to yank you out of your comfort zone. And then build from there. You'll be shocked what you'll be able to accomplish. I've said this before, but like, people are like, oh, well, Gary was an overnight success. No, he wasn't. He talked about this a little bit on Vets Talking last Saturday, but if you ever listen to Gary talk, it was years and years. His channel is 10 years old. 10-year anniversary was this past Sunday. That's 10 years. So, like, show me an overnight success, and I will show you success that was 10, 15, 20 years in the making. You have got to lay the groundwork for your own future, or else when opportunity comes knocking, you're not going to be ready to open the door. It's some wisdom that my grandpa likes to remind me of frequently. But I digress. Just try to think about what you want to do and then make goals and put tasks you're capable of doing that will help you accomplish and realize those goals. You're going to have to take it one day at a time, but like you have your main goal, and as long as you are still working towards that goal, whether you've got to make it in, whether it's a straight line, a diagonal line, a zigzag, a swirl, however you get there, okay? Just remember what you're doing it for, who you're doing it for, and why you're doing it, and keep Walt Disney the man's blueprint in mind. Okay? Like if you want to do screenwriting or animation or something like that, remember, storytelling comes first. Kids can handle villains, can handle truly evil villains. They can handle horror, but you should have music, and you should have ethos, and you should have love, like in the story. It doesn't have to be a love story, but even if it's, whether it's siblings or friends or a prince and a princess, whatever the case may be, like you have to make sure your foundational blocks are set, and then you have to start building. If you do not have the skills and you start to try building when the skills are not there, the foundation's not there, you're going to fall. Disney, like I said, is actively digging out their own foundation stones and still expecting their castle to be standing perfectly strong and tall and not topple. They're in for a very rude awakening. But I did not see any supers. Proven 22. I want pies now. Right? I love pie. Key lime! Yes, Disney changed how you access the parks back then. It went from tickets to park passes. That was an innovation. So, but they're not doing those things anymore. They're not even doing incremental innovation. They're just regurgitating ad nauseum things that have already existed without any kind of improvement. And then they're wondering why they can't get anywhere. They can't win anything. Yes, P used to be taxed because, yes, they used it to whiten clothes, which is crazy when you think about it. But, so I'm still up, but getting ready to call it here in just a sec. Pepina, I guess it depends what you're going into. Like, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, please go to college. If you want to be a structural engineer, choose your college wisely. You should do that anyway. But, like, especially if you're just going for your generals or you have no idea what you want to do not go to college and get yourself $80,000, $90,000, $130,000 in debt. Don't do that. In other words, don't be stupid. Yes, I agree. Yeah, don't clean pee with bleach. Don't do that either. Yeah. To sum up lessons that we've learned, you don't mix bleach with anything except water, and it's always 2 parts water, 1 parts bleach. Ammonia and bleach make mustard gas, and it will kill you. That is some World War I Nazi scientists. Yes, I know the Nazis weren't World War I, but you get my drift. That is literally some like World War I/Nazi. Don't do that. Disney of the 80s is not the Disney of today. At all. It's not even close. And that is why they're not pivoting. And that's why they won't pivot. And that's why this hostile takeover by Ike Perlmutter and Nelson Peltz is a possibility, because Disney refuses to admit that they're wrong and do the course correction that they need to do in order to save themselves and their investors and the company as a whole. Rather than doing that, they would rather continue to put their heads in the sand and live in denial and force you to reinforce their denial. Yes, community college for your generals. There's nothing wrong with it. It's tens of thousands of dollars cheaper. Tens of thousands of dollars cheaper. Tech school is a great option, especially if you want, like, they have cooking classes, they have sewing classes, they have swimming classes, they have my brain stopped. Emergency, like, you can go there for for paramedics, for firefighting, for police officer, like for your like law enforcement prereqs, you can go there. And then you've got the trades, you've got welding, you've got smithing, you've got woodwork, you've got plumbing, electric, you've got deep sea welding, which is a whole other level of insane. Like, there's so much out there. You just have to be willing to put in the work. And you have to remember that sometimes you're going to have to do stuff like, we'll use Gary's, like, from Gary's life. He had to go sell car parts, which is a skill. Like, he was a car part salesman in order to earn money so that he could eventually realize, like, so that his hobby could become his full-time job. So there's so much out there. Make sure that you just make sure you keep your end goal in mind. Make sure you keep that at the heart of your purpose and your drive. And of course, if you've got like a family or whatever that you're also trying to support, remember that they're a big part of it too, that you're doing this for them because you'll be a better wife, husband, mother, father, brother, sister, son, daughter, whatever the case may be, if you are actually fulfilling the promises to yourself. Because you should always try to keep promises to other people. If you can't, you need to admit to it. But you should never break a promise to yourself. Because if you can't keep your own word, then you're not going to be able to get anywhere in life and nobody's going to take you seriously. So that's sort of a recap from today. Disney was literally saved each and every single time by a princess. Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Little Mermaid. They are the reason that Walt Disney was allowed to continue to not only survive, but thrive, and are the cornerstones of that entire empire and industry. Yes, it started with Steamboat Willie, but without those princesses, without the original three, and then The Little Mermaid being the hit that it was in '89, which launched the renaissance of the 90s, Disney would not exist. It might not exist at all, but it definitely wouldn't be what it is today without those. So the next time you hear someone that wants to belittle or defame or diss the the old Disney princesses that are patriarchal slaves and are what did she call it, outdated, remind those people that the entire reason that Disney exists in the capacity that it does today is because of those Disney princesses. So, all right. That is all that I have for you guys tonight. Thank you so much for dropping by. I appreciate every single one of you. It is Friday night, Saturday morning, depending on where you are in the world, maybe even Saturday night. I hope that you all are have a wonderful weekend. If you are in the path of the blizzard, or if you're going through the blizzard right now, stay safe, stay warm. Much love to every single one of you. God bless. Godspeed. Good night. I'll talk to you.